Hey guys, how's it going? Okay, welcome back. All right, we are in week 4 now. We're gonna push a little bit further now and get into something that's going to be quite difficult for I think a lot of you for this week, because this is Zoo Week, live animals. This is where people can kind of fall down and trip over themselves because we have moving animals to deal with. Last week we were at the Natural History Museum dealing with skeletal structures and bones with dinosaurs and modern day animals. This week we're going to be concentrating on live animals, and some of you may have experienced drawing animals at the zoo, some of you may not, and if you don't, don't be too scared about it. Just have the confidence and the guts to just try it. Okay, we got to be able to at least try it so we know where we stay in terms of the quality of the drawing we can get out of observations of live animals. Now, the key to drawing live animals, and we talked about this a little bit last week, was laying in. The lay-in process of you doing a quick sketch. I also talked about that in the bug week too. Is the quick sketch of just laying in the process of the proportions and the shapes of that particular animal. You got to be really patient with the animals itself, and so it depends on the ones you're looking at too. Some will be, very lazy and lay about and sit there for you. Others, much like zebras, giraffes, elephants, are going to be constantly moving around. So having that visual memory where you kind of wait for them to be in a particular pose, you capture that moment on paper, okay? And so the lay-in process of really simple shapes, and the only way you're going to be able to do it much faster than trying to outline the drawing that you're seeing is through these simple shapes, okay? So through ellipses and cylinders and whatnot. But here's the pro, and here's one area that you can kind of use to help you with drawing animals. Let's say we're drawing a particular group of animals like giraffes or elephants or whatnot. When you're drawing one, the one right next to it will look identical to it. And so even if it moves, and if you could find that animal in a similar pose, you can just continue to draw the one right next to it, because again, the anatomy and the structure and everything will be exactly the same. And it even comes down to very heavily patterned animals like zebras. They're very much like horses, and if you look at a group of them, you can't really pick them apart. They're all the same. So let's stick with animals that are also very structured, that you can see the underlying muscles, the bone, all that kind of stuff. We want to stay away from fluffy animals, things like koalas, meerkats. I'm not saying don't approach them, but your first drawing, your first initial sketches when you arrive at the zoo should be animals that are easier to kind of break down. Things like rams, ibexes, gerenooks, easier to see and structure out. So I don't know if you guys know what a gerenuk is, but a gerenuk is, they're very smaller animals, but they're structured very much like giraffes. And you will see one on my live demo. So again, this is a quick lay-in using just ellipses, circles, and shapes to get the general anatomy in. I didn't even draw in the shapes of the legs. I just used, much like I said for last week with the bones, lines to get the proportion of the length of the legs correct. That way I have a general lay-in, that animal moved, went somewhere else. I can look at another animal next to it, find a similar pose, and continue to layer and add more shapes and details of things like the eyes and whatnot onto this thing, okay? And we can finish it off that way. Be careful of the smaller details. Things like the nose and the eyes are very important for animals. It gives a lot of personality to them. So what I don't want to see is this. A black dot for an eye. There's a lot more going on there than you're realizing. So things like pupils and corneas and reflections and light passing through the eyes. Things like the folds, the wrinkles, how they're integrated into the head. Maybe their lashes. So no black dots, a little bit more complexity in the eye itself, a bit more personality. Even if it's just not a circle. Let's say we have this head again in a larger drawing. I always like using a technique where it's a little bit more simple. We're just showing the flaps, the wrinkles of the eye. Much quicker, much faster. It still reads as an eye, where I'm just not drawing a circle, okay? And so when we're at the zoo, again, quick lay-in process, using simple shapes, lines to get proportion. Proportion is key, okay? From there, getting into the details, don't focus too much on them. Constantly move on. Your first 3 pages, like I've always said, will be just thumbnailing, simple drawings, and then you can progress the complexity afterwards. And so I'm still looking for about 6-7 pages for this week and a redesign. So the redesign will be a continuation of the creature you had before with the Natural History Museum with the bones, or you can start over and create a brand new creature. Be careful with creature designs for this week. What I don't want to see is this. That rhino has a cool horn. That giraffe has a cool pattern. That zebra has a cool tail or whatever. If you're taking pieces of animals and kind of piecing them together like a Frankenstein monster, and what you end up getting is this super creature that is beyond belief, and it doesn't work as design. You're not really designing. You're just cutting and pasting pieces together. This needs to be designed. So think about, when you're doing a creature design, not of the actual creature itself first, the environment. Where does it live in? Is it a desert area, jungle, grasslands, wet, whatever? You got to think about the environment first, and then design the creature that lives within it. Now, is it going to be predator, prey? What is the role of it? So all those kinds of factors will play into your design and look of the creature. Then you can start to pull the actual features of strengths and weaknesses of an animal. Is it speed? Is it strength? Is it heavily armored? Camouflage? All that kind of stuff will come into play, okay? And so this week is going to be a challenge, I think, for a lot of you with redesigns with the animal, because it can easily go into the non-belief and super fantasy. And if you want to go fantasy mythology, make sure that's your intent and really push for that. But if you're going to go something that's more of the actual creature entertainment style, then ground it in reality a little bit, okay? Other than that, take it slow and don't rush things, because once you start to rush, then you're going to really trip over yourself and get results that you don't want. And so start very simple and lead up to those complexities, okay? If you have any issues or questions, of course, save them up for the Q&A, and we'll kind of refine them from there. All right? Okay, good luck, you guys.
Hello everybody. Okay, welcome to week 4. This is the Los Angeles Zoo. Welcome back. For a lot of you, obviously, when you watched the Dynamic Sketching 1, I did visit the LA Zoo at the very end. I just did a really quick small demo just to introduce what to expect for this particular class. But now we're going to kind of really focus in on the zoo itself and some of the animals and to attack them. And do a couple demos here just to show you my approach on very different types of animals. So I'm going to start with a bird first here. This is something that I mentioned the week prior when we were drawing a lot of the dinosaur bones. And this is a cassowary from Australia. This is a double wall-root cassowary, and this is probably one of my favorite animals that exists today. It's extremely prehistoric looking. If you're ever you're interested in doing creature design, this is something I've kind of modeled off for quite a bit, and it's the shapes on it, the movement, the colors, its behavior is so unique and is so interesting in the animal kingdom. It's definitely a very distinct particular animal that sticks out to me, and like I said, it is very dinosaur-like in its overall structure, from the main body to the neck to the head to even the feet, and it's very raptor-like in many ways. It has one giant claw for one of its toes, and that's how it kills a lot of its prey. And this particular bird is also known to kill a lot of people per year, and the way it does it is by kicking and by cutting open and disemboweling you, basically. A very dangerous bird, very aggressive, very territorial. The colors are also very bright, blues, reds, purples, and its feathers that are on top of the body are not like bird feathers that we were, understanding of flight. It's more of a tough kind of hair-like feather almost. It's very bizarre. It does have small little wings and little spines that stick out of them, but this is a flightless bird. More of a, it is a walking bird, so much like the ostriches and emus. Distinctly, this one has a crest on the top of its head. The emus and ostriches do not. And a lot of people were quite confused as to why the cassowary had this crest initially, but after research and doing a lot of kinds of dissections and study, they found that the horn itself is not bone, it's not solid. And as you guys watch this demo and video, research a little bit about the things that we're drawing, or any of the things that we're drawing from the week prior, or here on out. And especially when you're on site, if there's a particular animal that you're drawing that you like, take notes of it, observations and call-outs, and then go home and research it more. That way you really truly understand exactly what you're designing and drawing. Now this cassowary, like I said, the crest on its head is not bone, it's actually hollow, and it uses it as a sound resonator. It increases the vibrations of the sound it makes, and it has a very low, just gruntled voice, which is used for mating calls and whatnot. It has very distinct wattles that come down from the neck, which are these pink reddish type of colors, and the feet are very big. They mostly eat fruit. They eat insects as well. They're omnivores, so they will eat meat as well. Fast runners. Another use of the crest itself is that they live in jungles, obviously, and so when they run, they have to clear the brush out of their way. So they'll kind of put their head down and use that crest to move out leaves and brush from their way. Now this sketch, I started out with an overall basic shape of the core of the body, and like I said, we have 3 distinct forms, and to me it was the core of the body, the neck up to the head. From there, once I got those shapes down, I went down to the feet, and now I'm starting with the main head into the details, darks, cross hatching, and then I'm going to come down into the body. Still understanding where my focal point is, much like I said from the week prior of doing the dinosaur bones, and we're still applying the same technique, the same method, the same steps. Now the challenge here is obviously that this bird is walking around as we speak. I'm drawing it fairly quickly, but it's also because I understand the shapes and I know how to draw this bird really well. I probably I wouldn't need to see this bird to draw it, but because it's there and I'm seeing it, it'll give me a better more accurate drawing, a representation of the bird that I'm trying to draw here. And it's again still a study. And for you guys, I highly recommend, again, starting out with basic thumbnails, and because the moving animals, the more you kind of do the shape and proportion study and of basic thumbnails, the better you'll get a more of a cleaner drawing if you want to do a more detailed drawing later on. And so do a bunch of thumbnails and study the animal first, and then get into your detailed steps. As you can see, a very large claw on the inner toe. Very thick and scaly feet, and a tough hide. Unique pattern and kind of a fold on the skin of the back of the neck, which I'll come in and indicate as well. And I also will start to include some of the environment which I mentioned from the week prior. As you can see, it's eating right now. And so the bird is moving around quite a bit. Now, before I even started to draw, I was observing the bird and looking for a very distinct pose, one that kind of maybe stopped or stood around it and hit a particular pose in. And so for a lot of the animals that you are drawing, that's what I highly suggest you guys do, is just kind of watch it for a minute, observe what it's doing, find a natural pose that it kind of goes into often, whether it be just a standing pose, a sniffing pose, or whatever. That way, when you know that when you start to draw the animal and it starts to move around again, you'll know that eventually it'll come back into that same pose. It's about being patient with the animals. You don't want to try to force the drawing through. If you really need the animal to be in a particular pose, just wait for it. Also, it may not apply to this particular animal because there's only one in the cage, but if there are certain animals that you are drawing and you have a particular pose and it moves around, a lot of times I look at the animal that's right next to it. And so let's say things like zebras or giraffes. All of those animals look identical to each other, so they're really, if there's a particular pose that you're liking from one animal and it's still the one next to it is in a similar pose, just use that one. As you saw earlier, the body of this cassowary is pretty much pitch black, but again, I still want to indicate lights, darks, coarse shadows, and texture. Just using cross hatching and line work. And I will start to include some of the environment in there, the bushes, the dirt, rocks. And I may start to make some of it up, even though if I don't see it, or if you don't have one, any kind of environment pieces in the animal that you're drawing, in the environment or the cage, just start to create your own. That way it gives it a sense of scale, grounds it on the paper, where I see a lot of sketches and drawings that are kind of floating around, and without any kind of cast shadow or any kind of surrounding environment. Yeah, it just kind of is there. Now, the more dynamic the pose that you can make, the better. A lot of the times this will help when the animal is feeding, or if the animal is maybe moving towards you or away from you. And so if it's a very, just kind of flat profile view, it's a little bit boring. If it's like a front view straight on, that's also a bit boring. 3/4, if it's walking or moving, even a distinct slight movement of a limb will help create a better or more interesting looking drawing for sure. Using the environment to frame my sketch also, that's a helpful way to fill up the page. And just remember, this is still observational study. This is dynamic sketching. This is visual communication. We're just trying to communicate what we're seeing observationally through interpretation, through indication, vignetting. Indication and vignetting is all about just picking out the stuff that stands out to us, indicating it a little bit by drawing it, whether it's in the focal point area, and letting the rest of it kind of fade back. So like in the feathers, I may indicate a lot more into the foreground and the front where it connects to the neck, and as it progresses back into the tail end, I'll just vignette it out, which is like, less and less lines. And if you guys do want to attempt more with color, please do play with it. I'm not going to be doing it much color demos because a lot of the times I am on site. But for you guys, because you're doing things on site and you can take it home with you and you want to submit it, then you can start to apply some color. A lot of times I like to just indicate color by just calling it out, notes, things like this, because it is just for myself. But for the class, if you want to explore a little bit of color, you are welcome to do so, because this particular animal is very colorful, and I've got to brought in some markers easily and hit a few spots on the foreground or the head area, the focal point area, and been done with that. Coming with a marker here. This is a 5, I believe. Same kind of dryish marker. Just hit a few spots. Actually, this might be 3, 30%. So the cassowary, again, a very unique bird. There's only one tamed cassowary in the world, in Australia, in the zoo there. And there are a lot of videos on YouTube of this particular animal. I would suggest you guys research it a little bit. It's a very cool particular bird, and I particularly myself use it quite a bit in reference. Moves just, or looks just like a dinosaur. I believe the #1 killer for this animal, is obviously man, but it's not through hunting. It's actually through traffic, car accidents. Roads are built through, their homes basically nowadays, and they have nowhere else to go, so they have to kind of live around the same environment, and so they get kind of in the way, and they get hit. Now the markers that you guys use, whether it's a darker value or lighter value, when you place your initial marks down, it may seem rather dark. So I would definitely wait a little bit to see how it settles and dries. A lot of times it dries a lot lighter than you first mark it down on. And so the dark markers that I used was a 70%, and it was very dark initially, but then it will start to dry and fade out a little bit, and your line work will start to come out. Again, very stark, distinct colors. The pen I'm starting to use is a 5, and that's pretty much what I started with, I believe. A lot of you guys will be starting with a really thin pen, a 1 or a 3. 3 is okay, I think, good for a lot of lay-ins and the quick drawing, but a 5 or a 7 is definitely a good pen to use for a medium and thick thickness to get some nice line variation, and also to really fill in those darks. So again, callouts, using arrows to point out a few details for myself, notes, indications. Showing you guys a quick interpretation of simple shapes. Again, very simplistic animal when you really look at it. It's just got to be able to see those shapes by observing it. A lot of those feathers and the crest hide those kinds of forms, but you got to be able to look past all that. Okay, there you go. The cassowary. Let's move around a little bit. We have a lot of larger scale animals, but we're going to come back into something a bit more structured, I guess. A lot of the animals I want you guys to approach should be an animal like this one, which is the gerenuk. And people mistake this one for things like deers or other kinds of spindly, bony type of animals. But these are the kinds of animals I want you guys to stick with. Things like horses, zebras, giraffes, where you can see the underlying structure, the muscle and the bone. The fuzzy, furry, animals, I'd rather you guys kind of avoid that for now. I'm not saying don't try it. Things like meerkats, koalas, those shapes, things like also like bears and even cats, the fur just gets so much in the way that you can't see the shapes underneath, and they're a lot harder to draw. So when you guys initially start to draw things out, I'd rather you guys start with animals like this. Still very simplistic, basic forms, Started out with the core shape of the body, going up into the head, now the legs itself. These particular animals are unique. I mean, they got a lot of personality behind them. Very big eyes, distinct patterning on them. They also have the characteristic of getting on their hind legs to get up on the higher branches. Really good balance, and very fast. This one in particular was kind of looking up and leaning up against the rock. There was a mound of hay on there. You know, the week prior I mentioned things like eyes. This one in particular has very large eyes, and you know, the eyes are the character and the personality of this animal, and pretty much any animal, you know, fish, people, whatever. Whatever has eyes, you can put a lot of personality behind it. And that's just, you know, a black dot with our white highlight on top of it. You know, things like separating the cornea and, you know, showing the gradations of darks and lights, the reflections. Framing this one, including again more of that environment. Now there's a second Gerenuk that kind of walked up next to it, so I'm going to include that as well. And I might not fully draw this one in, but still the main focus of the animal was the one on the left. It's a female, both of them are female. The one male that's inside this enclosure has horns. So after you guys, you know, expose yourself to a few animals that are easier to structure out, then, you know, do start to, you know, explore and try to attempt things that might not be as easy to understand the shapes of, but please do try. You know, the fuzzy types and the furry types are cuter for sure, but you know, they're quite frustrating to draw. Especially cats. To me, cats are definitely one of the harder things to draw because they're so rounded. There aren't any hard angular shapes with them. Now that I've done the overall drawing, the sketching, the laying, the shapes, the contouring, indicating the environment, now I'll start to go into some of the darks, indicating the pattern, finishing out the eye, and then also refining the line work. Now you are outside, well, hopefully a lot of you guys will be, and when you're drawing from on site, a few things to take note of are just, you know, and hopefully you guys have kind of already exposed yourself to it and learned from it, and especially for those of you that are, you know, already a bit experienced in drawing outside. You know, there are a lot of people around you. It might get busy. It might, you know, the environment itself might be uncomfortable. You gotta stand and draw. Just get used to it, and you know, the benefit of drawing on site, it's just so crucial. You get so much more information from seeing it three-dimensionally. I mean, this particular animal that we're drawing right now, the Gerenuk, I mean, you could have researched it online. I saw a few videos, you know, but it's like to be in the environment, seeing the sounds or hearing the sounds, seeing the movement, the muscles moving in and out with much more clarity than you would with a video or an image. For sure, they more, you know, get a lot more information from this particular way of studying. You know, it's just benefits you as a designer so much when you have to start getting into things like designing your own creatures, or even designing animals that are just background animals like this that you can want to create. You know, you can pull from so much. You know, drawing on location is quite the challenge. You can be home in front of a photograph or a video and just study it for hours on end and get that perfect drawing. But I mean, that gives you the luxury of time because you know that you're not being stressed to constantly move on. And also in the fact that you can have that animal pose in a particular angle for you, and you can just kind of sit there and copy what you're seeing. Whereas with on-site drawing, especially with animals, you got to be just so much quicker. You got to adapt to the situation, and you got to reinterpret and think so much faster, and it really will train you to be much quicker. So drawing on site to me not only helps build speed, it helps build a lot more confidence, and it helps in just the interpretation and understanding of shapes better because you can see it much clearly in 3 dimensions. See it from different angles, and of course definitely when it comes to movement, the dynamic action of something. A place we will not be going to will be the aquarium, unfortunately. A place I decided not to draw there and do demos because the enclosure, the setting itself is very dark. Aquariums are very dark, and so you wouldn't have been able to see my drawings. However, if you guys want to, please do visit a few places that might not be on the list and check them out for sure. Aquariums are a lot of fun to draw at. Marine biology is one of my favorite stuff to study, and obviously, definitely when I'm doing any kind of design work with entertainment and creatures or monsters, I'll definitely use a lot of marine biology. Marine biology and insects, I pull a lot from. Animals are great when it comes to larger type of animals that are, transport or pack animals, or food. Still all my focus into that first Gerenuk. Now the rock structure that I'm kind of indicating here, there's hay on top of that, and so that'll be one texture or variation of line work. But with boulders and rocks, there's a very distinct way of definitely patterning those out. The kind of texturing I'll use on the animal might be a little bit more curved or organic, but with rocks I like to definitely use more straight cross hatching to give that chiseled edge look to it. It might be a smooth boulder, but we still want to give it some planes to be able to read as rock. Now, when you look at the spine of this animal, the back, from the back end up to the neck, the shoulder, all the way up the neck to the head, there's a center line with all animals, and the center line you can use, to your benefit quite a lot with a lot of animals that you're going to be drawing. Find that center line. The center line will give you the sense of direction, so the animal is looking towards the right, and so I'll use a center line to show the direction of either movement or line of sight. Very graceful animal and very quirky looking. So that box frame is just to kind of give it a little bit of framework, and also to include some of the environment. Drawing this size, I probably recommend you guys do maybe just 1 or 2 of them, and please do try them at this scale. Your first initial drawing should definitely be still really small thumbnails, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't try a few larger drawings and try to control your details. And so, start out with small drawings first, that way you don't get pulled in by a lot of those indications of, small little fur or patterning or whatnot. And then when you start to get into a bigger drawing like this, then you can really explore the intricacies of nature. trying to get a nice distinct line around it, create a silhouette. I've also indicated the core shadow really well. I also actually indicated the highlight. I used an actual shape, an ellipse, to indicate where my highlight is. And then grouping my values. And I'm using a very thick pen right now, again, because I'm going into my darks. And I'm just chiseling a lot of that background rock right now. And these Gerenux have very distinct white patches around their eyes, which I definitely want to indicate because it brings a lot of attention to it. And this technique you don't have to, again, apply for every single one of your drawings. This is just something I like to do. You just create a white border around it, again, just to help pop out that silhouette. So where those, the places that I'm indicating my highlights, I've already indicated with a line drawing. So that transition from the front to the back, even though it's outside of my ellipse, I still want to continue a little bit so that it's not a harsh kind of clean line. We want to show that gradation and blend. And as you can see, still all my focus is going onto that one Gerenuk. The one to the right, I just simply use as a basic line drawing, and I probably won't touch it more than that. Create that focal point, use it as a way to lead your viewer, the person who's going to look at it, letting them know what is the focus, what you want them to look at, and what direction you want them to go. So composition of the page is really important as well. Play with that for sure. And when you guys are doing your smaller drawings like thumbnails or even a little bit bigger, even though you might have one drawing next to another that might not be related, you can still overlap. Don't feel like the drawings have to butt up right next to each other. I'm not going to do too much more on this. I'll indicate a few more spots to keep going a little bit. And much like I said, these kinds of animals, you can easily tell the bone structure. You can see where that sinewy ligaments are and such. So, all right, great. Let's keep moving. Other types of animals. Flamingos, we got tigers. Again, avoid these kinds of animals for now. Come back to them. They'll always be there for you. But actually, now that we're actually talked about big cats, furry animals, let's attempt one for this last demo for you guys. So we've kind of practiced on a bird. We've done an animal structure that's easily kind of interpretable in terms of the shapes and forms of the skeletal structure and bones. But we're gonna do the tiger right now. This is a Bengal tiger, and like I said, cats hard to draw. They're very rounded in their form, furry, so you can't see the blend of the structure, the bones and the muscles into the limbs, into the body. So you're going off the outer shape and the silhouette of what the fur is doing, and not what the underlying structure, the bones and muscles are doing. And so you got to think a little bit differently when you're drawing furry animals. Still, I am constructing it with a very simple, basic shape. The core form, the head to the back end, those three distinct shapes, and then back down to the legs. Still indicating my contours, but now I'm not drawing the skeletal or the muscle structure or the ligaments and the tendons that I'm seeing with the Gerenuk that I did. But with this one, I'm just drawing what the shape of the fur is doing with the silhouette. And so trying to create a dynamic pose with this one I cut the tiger kind of walking across a stream in water onto the rocks. I believe this is a younger one. This might have been it was a new addition. And so I'm doing it with the marker right now, and I've drawn simple shapes, and I'm going in there and just drawing a value, a shadow structure really quickly, to give myself, you know, a guideline to go from. So I started out really structured, went in with the chiseled edge and kind of used some gestural strokes for the shadow, but I'm still going back in there with the pen and redrawing those shapes that I had. You know, the basic circle and ellipse for the cranium of the skull. The rib cage and the hip area. Connecting those all together. And then going down to the limbs. Now, you know, all the drawings we've been doing, the demos I'm doing here, the most important thing really is not just this cross-hatching, the shadow and light, all that kind of stuff, which I'm indicating all of, and which I don't expect you guys to do just yet until the very end of your drawing set. But it's mostly in the focus of the proportion and the shapes, initially what I'm doing. You know, so the proportion of the animals is going to be really important for you guys, you know, much like it was for the Natural History Museum with the bones. And you know, I want you guys to bring those same kinds of ideas and methods right over to your live animals. But it really is going to come down to just the accuracy of your proportions, because if it looks just a little bit off, I'm going to notice, or anybody's going to notice, because we know these animals so well and you've seen them thousands of times, and so one small thing out of place, you'll know. And a lot of times if you find out that a mistake or the interpretation is so wrong, or to the point where you really can't do anything else with it, you know, instead of just trying to save it, don't try to save it. No matter how much more detail, no matter how much lighting, whatever you put on it, it's just not gonna work. And so you gotta be able to just stop and say, okay, I messed up on it, and accept it, and try it again. Now this is all these drawings are my first attempts. You know, I'm not doing it several times, and a lot of this has to really do with the mileage and the experience. And just the understanding of what I'm drawing. Now if I was drawing something for the very first time, the demo might be a little bit longer, because I'd probably have to figure out what those shapes are in front of me. You know, I've done the overall structure of the body, indicated a few parts with line drawing. Now I'm just getting the actual details of the face, and I'll continue that detail of the fur, and I'll start to create a guideline and a map of where those stripes will be for the animal. And as I continue to push this along, you'll start to notice, you know, you can really distinctly see those overall basic shapes. Those will start to disappear. Starting to focus on the blend of how that limb actually blends into the main body. And remember, I'm not using, you know, the muscle or the connective tissue, but I'm using the fur. You know, after you guys, you know, do your observational on-site sketching, and like I said, when you start to research a little bit of the animals that you're drawing, then you can start to focus in on what the underlying structure of, let's say, this tiger. Okay, as you can see, starting to indicate a few of the striping, still sticking to the front focal area. This one will probably be one of the longer demos because I'm probably going to put a bit more work into it. And no matter what, really start to pace yourself. You know, when you start to draw and you put everything into your first set of drawings, you're really gonna, you know, wear yourself out. And your last few, I mean, it's much like working out. I mean, you just get tired, you get fatigued, and yeah, you just skip steps, you'll miss things, and it gets frustrating, and you'll start to really lose interest in it. And so keep a steady pace. Try not to, you know, overly do, you know, any kind of over accomplishment on the first few drawings that you do. Kind of work slowly at the beginning, where it's just keeping it really simple, and then really saving all that energy for the very last few drawings. Gone back with a thicker pen, reinforce that silhouette, thicker and thin lines. I've hit, you know, kind of indicated a few of the stripes, and now I'm going to start to really darken them out. But like I said, please just avoid trying to do one of these kinds of animals very first. It's still very difficult to draw, even though I've drawn it many times. Still not that easy for me. I'm going to start from front to back. I'm not going to kind of be spotty with this one. I want a nice consistent flow of the striping, and so this would definitely help also with the stripes becoming almost like a natural contour. It shows me how that shape and the form turn of the body, you know, whether it be the shoulder area, the rib cage, or even the limbs and the arms. You know, those stripes are a great indicator of how it looks three-dimensionally. And so I'm going to use that to my advantage. Use the stripes also to blend from one shape to another so they feel connected. Tigers were a little bit hard to draw because they were quite far away, so I had to observe a little bit close, a little bit slower. And the fact that I was drawing a cub, which was very mobile, running around, jumping from one spot to another, tackling its sibling, made it quite difficult to be an observational drawing because I really did have to wait around, observe it first quite a bit before drawing it, and then start at it. The lions, however, are a different story because the lions are a lot lazier. They'll kind of lay about and sleep all day. Okay, now I'm going to start to indicate a little bit of the shadow, some of the core. And some of the casts as well. Now the patterning of the tiger, you know, I don't want to fill in every single one all the way throughout the entire thing. I still have a focal point, and so the darks I'm going to keep up into the head and the shoulder area, and within the stripes I might just add a slight, you know, cross hatching or just a few hints of darks here and there, but I don't want to fill in every single little stripe throughout the entire body. As you can see from this point already, a lot of that underlying structure and shape and form is pretty much disappeared. It's still there, but that overlying layer of detail, the striping, the indications of the face is what pops out. So have faith and you know, understand that your initial laying and process and all that kind of stuff might look quite ugly, you know, because it is just a basic interpretation of a shape. But you gotta understand that if you stick with it, you know, as long as your proportion is correct and you stick with it, you can still pull off an interesting sketch. I'm going to come in with my marker real quick and just indicate a slight dark value. Now these guys have a darker value with the oranges on the body and a nice distinct white patterning on top. The tigers in general use the orange and the striping as camouflage. They'll hide in tall grass, lay low, and they'll blend in real nicely. Now when you guys start to do your redesigns this week, you know, we're doing an animal redesign, so you can carry on with the animal that you had from the previous week with the Natural History Museum, or you can create something brand new. The animal itself, obviously, you know, I don't want it to be this super creature, and so when you're drawing from animals from the zoo, you know, it's like you might find a few here and there that you like, oh, that's great, that patterning, or the horns on that, or the limb structure on that, and you start taking pieces of animals that you've seen before, and you're thinking about your redesign, you start to cobble everything together. And I've mentioned this before when we were doing redesigns for creatures, but just be careful of not to create that super beast. And you know, it does everything. It runs super fast, and it can jump this high, it can, you know, use poison here and whatever. And so if you want to ground it in a little bit of reality, you know, just give it a few perks, and of course a few, you know, things that kind of make it disadvantaged, maybe, I'm not sure. But think about when you're first drawing the creature itself, to decide what kind of creature you're designing. Is it going to be a predator? Is it going to be prey? The function of it, you know, how it moves around, how it attacks, all that kind of stuff. So even before you even start the design, I think the first decision should be the environment. You know, is it wetlands? Is it tall grass? Is it desert? Is it cold? Is it jungle? So those kinds of features will definitely drive the design of the animal. It definitely does so for this one in particular, like the tiger. So it lives in grasslands. So it depends on the animal that you want to create, but the environment will really control the look of that animal. So I'm using the white right now to indicate that nice white patch around the eye, a few spots where there's white around the edge of the jaw and the mane a little bit, a few highlight points. But it's not glossy, it's not shiny. A lot of this has to do with just the patterning and also the white of the fur. I'm going to come back and hit that value one more time just to darken it up. You know, when your marker value dries, it will dry light, like I said, and so the best thing to do if you want to get a little bit darker is just to overlay one more layer of marker value on top. And you can do this as a blend, and then you can also get this, you know, a darker value increase at a slower degree, and so that it does blend better. Instead of trying to go up in a darker value, or, you know, lower in value, I guess what I'm saying, just use the same marker and go over the same, you know, areas again and again to get that value darker and darker. The more that paper absorbs that ink, the darker it'll get. Just filling in a few shapes here and there, a few open gaps, but still nice distinct focal point up in the front and the head area, up into the shoulder, a little bit in the back. But you can see the back legs, the the hip area. There's still striping there, but it's just slight indications. Still a really simplistic area back there. Okay, this one's almost done. A few more parts here and there. But good luck with the homework. You know, the homework for this week will be 6 pages as usual from the zoo, live animals. Take as many pictures as you can, come back home and draw those, and also your redesign, which will be the creature design. Please start out with basic thumbnails, simple drawings at first, then work your way up like this. Okay, good luck you guys.